Welcome to the Great Ideas Podcast, where we explore many topics, including leadership, teamwork, relationships, politics, economics, pop culture, health, sports, food, and anything else that's a great idea. I'm your host, Barry Moline. Today, we're talking with Austin Ambrozi, leader of the Artificial Intelligence Group for the Forbes Business Council and founder of the AI company Doxy. Austin talks about the transformative impact of artificial intelligence, particularly artificial general intelligence. Austin discusses how AI is redefining machines from tools to peers, enhancing industries like healthcare and software development by providing junior workers with access to advanced knowledge. We also touch on AI's potential to displace jobs, leading to massive societal disruption with potentially large job losses. We talk about the ethical and energy concerns associated with AI, emphasizing the need for transparency and innovation in the field. It's a great conversation, and it really opened my eyes to all this new AI technology, what it can do, and maybe where it's going. Let's get into it. Well, welcome, Austin, to the Great Ideas Podcast. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Barry. It's good to be here with you.
Well, Austin, we're talking about AI today, and I'd like to know, what does artificial general intelligence mean to you?
Well, just to jump right into it. For starters, I think it means something where the goalposts are moving a lot as of late. There was a pretty succinct definition for it for a long time, for decades, I would say. And then as we started getting closer to it, we realized that it wasn't as simple as we thought. So the original definition was artificial intelligence that has reached a level of general human level intelligence. And what that means is that it was a machine that has such strong cognitive abilities that it would become indistinguishable from a human being. And as we started getting closer to that threshold, we started realizing that it wasn't that simple, and that intelligence isn't evenly distributed across every domain that it could possibly apply to. So you could have, for instance, you could have a machine that has the highest level understanding of the English language, but only, a toddler's level understanding of basic arithmetic. Right. So it's like, where do we categorize something like that? Something that has more memory and more knowledge than any other human that's ever existed, but struggles with basic math. So if you would ask what it means to me today, what I think artificial general intelligence means is a threshold of AI where we begin to view the machine as a peer instead of as a tool.
So as we think about AI, you just described the perfect, most intelligent brain that you can possibly pull together sort of on the planet. And let me parse that a little bit, because when I think about succession planning, for example, I think about a senior leader who's been in the business for 30, 40 years, has a lot of experience, has a lot of gut level experience, and has seen a lot of action, and can connect the dots very quickly on a new situation. And there are other people who have 30 to 40 years in a similar business that maybe can contribute to intelligence. Pick a business like, let's say, office supplies. It's a business like office supplies sales. I know what my clients' needs, and I see new products coming along, and I see trends in the way products are used. This is something that you may not have thought much about, or I may not have thought much about, but there's a lot of people that work in office products. I was thinking about the show The Office, okay?
Sure.
So if we're able to combine, using what you've said to me in the past, the hive brain, right, or hive mentality, where you're able to combine the knowledge of a lot of people, is that a direction that can be achieved faster in a specific industry? And of course, office supplies. We could talk software development. I worked in the electric utility industry. There are guardrails in the electric utility industry on what's good and what's not good. So the decisions that one can make are limited. Nevertheless, it takes a while to learn what those are. So when you're talking about a targeted industry, is it easier to create that hive brain?
It's going to be easiest in industries where it's going to be the level of difficulty is going to scale in line with the degree to which there is a digital footprint left. So for instance, somebody who is a knowledge worker, let's say a software engineer, there's a very large digital footprint for their work about where it started, kind of midway through, and where it ends. Versus somebody that is digging a ditch, there's less of a digital footprint. There's a much larger physical footprint, but less of a digital footprint. And that's just going to be something that's important near term. Near term, it's going to be the place where, data is the world's first limitless asset. That's something that I feel like doesn't get discussed very much. Just because it's limitless doesn't mean that it's always tangible, right? And so AI relies on data, but we need tangible data. So it's going to be most noticeable and most pronounced in sectors where that data is inherently tangible, and it's going to take a little bit longer for the sectors where it is less tangible. It'll still arrive in those sectors too. We'll find a way to make that data tangible, but it's going to definitely start in the knowledge economy for sure.
Got it. All right, so let's take healthcare, a doctor's diagnosis. I remember 25 years ago going to my doctor after visiting a Caribbean island, and I had a strange flu-like disease. And he thought, "Wow, this is weird, and you've had it for now a month, and it's got a lot of strange symptoms. It wasn't deadly, it was just weird." And he said, "Give me a minute. Let me go to my office and look at a book." And he brought me over to his office. He opened up a book and he found a particular disease that matched and this was in a narrative, sort of like a Encyclopedia Britannica for doctors. And he found what he was sort of looking for. And then it had some ideas for treatment. And I would imagine that today, well, we know that diagnoses exists in electronic form, that a doctor can enter certain symptoms, and the diagnosis may not be very specific, but it can be, here are 3 things to look at, and whatever that doctor did in the 15-20 minutes it took to open up the book, look around, talk to me, bring me in, show me the book, and so on, could be done in 30 seconds. And then it recommended some ideas for treatment. Of course, it depended on the doctor to identify that treatment. I imagine that AI could also, based on data for treating that particular disease, could say, this particular treatment is 80% effective. Here are some other treatments that are less effective. So in the order of options. Yeah. Is that a good example of how an application for AI?
Yeah, I talk about the knowledge economy, and a lot of times when people talk about the knowledge economy or knowledge workers, they think, the default go-to is a programmer, software engineer, someone who's in front of a screen all day typing. But that's not the only example of a knowledge worker. If you think about, or another way of pinpointing who is a knowledge worker and who isn't per se, which we all are to some degree, but are really on the upper bounds of that curve, look at how long somebody has to go to school. Right. So if you have to go to school for a very long time before you can do that career, say become a lawyer or become a doctor, then it's probably because there was a lot of knowledge that you had to acquire before you could do that work. So we're already seeing examples of people that, and this is for humans and animals, that there's some illness, the doctor either diagnoses it incorrectly or says they don't know what it is, defers to, a catch-all like stress or inflammation, poor diet, gut health, a catch-all thing. And then the patient goes and asks ChatGPT, or someone owns, like the owner of a dog, or even themselves, submits their same blood work files that they showed the doctor to ChatGPT or to one of these other large language models, and are getting the correct diagnosis. And that's later confirmed, and the doctor's kind of like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I missed this, type of thing. So we're already seeing that happen. This isn't even a hypothetical anymore. And something else that we're seeing happen is not only seeing it on a qualitative side, but the quantitative side as well. Like some of these large language models are able to comb through thousands and thousands of medical images the drop of a dime. So that's to answer your question, it's a very good example of what we're going to start to see. And we're starting to see, we're crossing the threshold where these systems are beginning to be able to identify abnormalities in these scans and these files at a higher rate of accuracy than most doctors, than the average doctor will say.
Well, since you brought that up, I saw a study recently that showed radiologists' ability to find tumors using their x-rays. And the numbers were, a radiologist alone was 74% accurate in finding a tumor on an x-ray. A radiologist plus AI, so AI is saying, we're seeing some tumors here, you take a look and confirm what you see. That was 76% accurate. The AI alone was 92% accurate. Yeah. So there were tumors on the x-ray, and the AI picked it up much more frequently. The doctors were questioning what the AI was recommending. What they were seeing, of course, they only picked up so many, but AI was recommending an additional 20% or 15%, and saying, the docs were saying, I don't know about that. I'd say no. And what does that mean? That means people are getting sicker.
Yeah, and that's not the only industry where we're seeing that happen. I love that you brought that up, because I saw similar studies in programming where they were trying to improve the programming of a particular AI program. They were doing two things. One, they were trying to improve the program's efficacy, and then two, they were trying to debug. And those are two separate processes. In both of those processes, the AI was doing better on its own than it was when combined with the human. Like, the human was in third place, it was human plus AI in second place, and the AI alone was in first place for the best performance, which is a bit jarring, because on the one hand, we should be enthused about this, because that sets the stage for a generation of accomplishments that are going to, in theory, supersede anything that we've ever seen from any human being ever. And that's something to be very excited about. The reason why it's jarring is because we're experiencing this feeling of kind of letting our hands off the wheel a little bit. And that's where it gets uncomfortable for people. And I'll kind of wait till I'm sure there's a portion of this that you want to kind of talk about the fear mongering and stuff like that. But just kind of as a preface for that, I think the reason for that is that the natural human instinct for dominion over oneself is very innate. It's a very innate human desire to have, control over your own outcomes, even if that control leads you to a less than desirable outcome. Like, a perfect example of this is, a Tesla, it statistically crashes less than, it's less likely to crash than a human. But like, the second that your Tesla crashes and you weren't the one that's driving, it is mayhem. You know what I mean? It's interesting how we seem to be having higher standards for the machines than we do for humans. And I think that comes down to the desire for personal liberty and personal control over one's outcomes.
So does this allow junior workers to access the knowledge of senior workers, and therefore we don't need as many senior people?
Yeah.
Or senior people with higher salaries.
Yes, I think so. And it's so interesting, because that's something that we didn't see coming. That's something that most of the industry didn't see coming. I think that for a long time, and it's so crazy how we can be wrong about things that we were so certain of, and in hindsight, it's always 2020. And we've done that a couple times, by the way. But we went into this thinking that, AI is going to start, it's going to reach a pretty impressive level of proficiency to where it kind of like weeds out the junior level people, but you'll never be able to replace the top level people, the people with 30, 40 years of experience and whatnot. And what we're actually seeing is that we were correct, that the machines, at least not yet, cannot yet replace the people with 30, 40 years experience. However, the way that it is truly interacting with these lower level people is that it's going above where their levels of proficiency were, and sort of functioning as like a step stool to improve the proficiency and the skill levels of these lower level workers. Because some kid fresh out of college doesn't have any real work experience, doesn't have all of the experience of the person with 40 years experience, but that college kid no longer has to go through the same hard knocks that veteran went through. They have an entity that doesn't eat, sleep, or need vacation, that is there for them 24/7 to answer any question they have, to correct the questions that they're even asking, and intuit what it is that they're trying to achieve to progress their understanding of their field much faster than any other human that's gone through that journey before them.
Wow. That'll be a big shift over time. Although it may be happening at a good time when baby boomers are retiring. I think there are fewer people behind them for senior level positions. I'm guessing there's a few that could get knocked off their pedestal all along the way. So when do you think artificial general intelligence, AGI, will actually arrive at a wholesale level across the board? And then what do you think will happen when we get there?
When? It'll be within this decade, I'm guessing. It'll be before the end of the 20s. I genuinely believe that. And then as far as what begins to happen, it depends on what part of the world you're asking about. We'll just keep it with America for right now. For America, I think that we're going to shift to universal basic income. I think that it'll be the only thing that logically makes sense. The way that we do that is going to probably depend on the different people who's president, who's holding like various offices and whatnot. But kind of what I would imagine is that it's going to be an expansion of unemployment. So it's either going to be a gradual, slow rollout to everyone, or it's going to be the type of thing where if you can somehow submit or document evidence that your job displacement is a result of technology or of artificial intelligence, that you're eligible for an increased level of unemployment. I'm speculating here, but that's genuinely what I think is going to happen, because we're going to arrive at a point where the entities that are most qualified to conduct work are non-human. And so it's crazy, and it sounds tinfoil hat and this sort of thing, but we're already seeing it with some of these big headlines. I think Salesforce, it's a major Fortune 500 company, that put out a statement saying that they're not hiring any more junior level or mid-level software engineers as of this year. Meta put out a statement saying that they believe that soon, within the next couple of years, they believe that AI will assume the role of all their mid-level engineers as well.
I appreciate that prediction. That's kind of amazing. So we'll talk about universal basic income in just a second.
Sure.
Or really, what you're saying is significant disruption to society, because you sort of leapfrogged into a solution, but it sounds like disruption first.
Apologies if I wasn't answering your question.
That's okay. No, that's all good. Okay, so wow. Well, let me just say this. I've noticed in the past 6 months that there's shrinking in the tech sector. Their jobs are being lost, and there's announcements. I haven't been paying close attention to what those job losses have been or the explanations of them. I thought it was tied to a slowing economy. And what you're saying is that these are actually targeted and will grow over time because, well, for lack of a better way to say it, the machines, it sounds like Big Brother and so on and so forth, but nevertheless, the machines are doing the work that individuals, humans did, and that will only grow and get better. And that's just a fact of life. So there will be fewer jobs in significant software development because are the machines using previous software and just making tweaks to it, or are the machines developing software that can solve problems that
they're writing new code?
Yeah, they're writing new code. Wow.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is we're going to see this across more industries than just tech. It's just tech is the one where it's like we don't have to speculate. It's here right now. We can look at big tech giants these are people that are in charge of tens of thousands of jobs that are doing this right now. So throughout time, what's kind of been the story is that jobs are lost and new jobs are created, right? Like we don't need the town blacksmith anymore, right? And like there are fewer cab companies now, but there are a lot more Uber drivers, and there are different examples of this, right? What's interesting about that trend is that technology seems to be progressing on a linear growth curve, right? So there's been more technological advancement in the last 20 years than there was the previous 100, comparatively speaking. So if we accept the premise that technology is going to be progressing at an increasing rate, then that means that this next wave it's reasonable to conclude that this next wave is going to be progressing by definition exponentially faster than any other era previously. And kind of what I'm seeing and what I'm predicting is that the jobs are going to disappear faster than the new ones pop up. That doesn't mean that the new ones are not going to pop up or that we're going to be consumed by this whole, the jobs are just infinitely disappearing and we can't catch up. It's just to say that there is going to be some lag time between how society reorganizes itself around this new paradigm and what different roles there are within this new paradigm. So it's like the paradigm's it's gonna come quick like a truck, and then it's gonna take a little bit of lag time before we see what the new paradigm looks like.
So the question is, how long will it take for software engineers to retrain as plumbers and electricians?
Leisurely activities like art and creativity, right? Kinda.
Yeah. Wow. I don't know. It's mind blowing. It really is. So then we don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but nevertheless, what you might imagine is large amounts of unemployment, and at least in the tech sector and knowledge sectors, and then that will lead to some kind of political solution that requires, well, as you mentioned, universal basic income. And I'm not sure if that is a euphemism for a type of welfare, but at a time when the country's already in debt, it seems like that's a downward spiral.
I personally don't view it that way. The reason why is because I think an example or kind of a good thought experiment for this that I bring up is people have been afraid about what happens with all of the creative works, like the hardcore economy, and talk more about kind of. It's funny because we thought that the arts were going to be the last thing to go, and they were actually the first. Image generation and copywriting and sort of these creative outputs, kind of the first to go in terms of what the machines are capable of. And just because they're capable of that, there's a difference between being able to play basketball and being able to be in the NBA, right? So just because the machines are capable of doing it right now doesn't mean that they are better than the best artists in the world at present. Whether or not that happens in the future, speculation doesn't really matter for the purposes of this thought experiment. The purpose of the thought experiment is like, well, what if they do? Because maybe it's not even a qualitative thing. Maybe it's a quantitative thing where there's just going to be so much AI generated art, so much AI generated videos that now content creators can't make content. And all we ever see is stuff from a computer, and it loses the human touch and whatnot. And it's like, the important thing to remember here, like within the context of social media and like content creation, the algorithms are on our side as well. There's stuff on the supply side, and there's also stuff on there's tech on the supply side. There's also tech on the demand side. So the algorithms are only going to get better at showing us what we want to see. Okay. So the only version of reality in which we are only being fed AI generated content, the only way that happens is if that is what we want to see, and the algorithms are serving us what we want to see. And that sounds pretty good to me, because it's like at first glance, it's like, well, no, I want human generated stuff. Like it's more valuable to me. I hold human created artwork on a higher pedestal, right? So what that means is that I'm kind of discriminating against AI a little bit. And that is exciting because of the fact that it means that the only way that the AI generated content overtakes the human generated content is if it is so much better that it can surmount that premium that I've applied to human generated content. And so when we take that thought experiment and apply it to the economy, it's like the only way that there is mass layoffs and there's no work for anybody is a version of reality in which everything's flowing like clockwork, and it's automated, and there's just so much value creation that it's just the whole way that we even think about work and what it means to consume goods and services, it changes. And it's something that is scary for sure, because it's been the bedrock of human existence for all of human time thus far. But again, I try to just anchor myself to the premise of the only way that happens is if we have effectively automated all of the goods and services that people want, because all that it means to have an economy is to provide goods and services that people want. So the only way that you don't have a job is if you cannot provide anything that people want. And something that is certain about humans is that we're always going to be unhappy with something. Pretty much, that's been my experience. People are always going to be unhappy with something. Anytime someone's unhappy with something, that is an opportunity for you to go provide value to them vis-a-vis a good or a service. And so if there are no opportunities for you to do that, then by definition, that means that there's nothing that people are upset about. And that is not something for us to be afraid of, I don't think.
Yeah. Well, are there any jobs that are relatively safe? I mentioned plumbers and electricians. Is it people who work with their hands? Is that a safer way to go? Construction?
I think it'll be the last to go, and nobody knows. By the way, everybody's speculating on the future, myself included.
Well, in construction, there's 3D printing of houses that involves the use of concrete, and there are humans involved and so on, but there's many fewer humans involved in building that. Plumbing could, when you think about 3D printing, you can think about adding in plumbing in that as well.
The reason why it looks like that will be the last to go, why the crafts, the traditional trades, the men in ditches and people laying bricklayers, stuff like that. The reason why it looks like it's going to be the last to go currently is because it is currently in last place. It's currently in last place relative to all the other sectors, all the other domains. And so it's like reason to believe that, the trend is going to continue and that it will be the last to go. However, I think that thinking might be flawed, because the reason it's in last place kind of goes back to what I was talking about 5 or 10 minutes ago when I was talking about the amount of data that has been tangible for us to serve machines, right? Like we haven't really had somebody that, like in the ditches, laying the bricks, doing the concrete work, that has been transcribing that data in a way that is ingestible for AI. But that is about to change dramatically, because kind of this next big push that we're going to see is going to be in the humanoid robot, I guess we'll call it revolution, with, you've already seen Tesla's Optimus robots, and then there's several firms out of China that are making huge strides there, Boston Dynamics and other players like that. And that is something that we are beginning to exit the stage of speculation on and enter the stage of observation with, because I think it's a Toyota factory or a Nissan factory that they just committed to a large rollout of humanoid robots in their factories. I know Amazon's been looking at humanoid robots for their factories. So physical labor has been in last place. That's because it's had the least amount of energy put towards it. What we don't know is how quickly it is going to rise whenever energy is put towards it. Whenever we do start collecting data from these humanoid robots, how quickly can one humanoid robot teach another humanoid robot to not stumble? Is that an easier thing for them to teach each other than how to do calculus or how to write code that can handle cybersecurity objectives and things like that? You know what I mean? And when we think about it like that, it's like, I, as a human, I learned how to not stumble, and I learned how to balance myself on my own 2 feet faster than I learned calculus. It doesn't mean that the robots will be the same, but it does raise an interesting perspective, I think.
Yeah. And just as one example, I was working with a group of healthcare professionals recently, and I brought up the notion of humanoid robots working with autistic patients, where they have difficulty making friends, difficulty with emotional intelligence. And here you have a bot that is an immediate friend to a child or even an adult who can assist. And it makes all the difference, because you are, forgive me for saying it like this, but you're not wearing out another human who is a caregiver. The bot can go forever and is always available to be that caregiver and that friend. And I showed pictures of them, and the healthcare workers said, yeah, we've seen some of these. Are these going to be big? Like, yeah, I think so. They're going to be big. And at a time when it's difficult to find those kinds of caregivers. So it actually fills a void. That's important. Another example that I've noted in transportation is, and this is when we talk about driverless cars and driverless trucks are also on the horizon. There's a shortage of truck drivers. A lot of people don't like to do long haul driving. Long haul driving in trucks is what an AI truck does well. You
Yeah.
get it on the road and it goes 24/7
Doesn't get
from
bored.
point A to point B. Yeah. And then it gets off the road and a local truck driver hooks up and takes the load to, in the city where the AI truck doesn't work as well, or it's harder to navigate in those areas. So that's actually a good fit. We don't have those truck drivers, those long haul truck drivers. So here's, something reasonable. I was in San Francisco recently, and I live in Sacramento, so we don't have Waymo there, but they're all over San Francisco. And I was there with my family who was not aware of self-driving cars or AI, and it was like the punch buggy game or something where you see a Volkswagen, there's a punch buggy, there's a punch buggy. It was like, there's a Waymo, oh, there's a Waymo, and there's a Waymo, and it just looks weird that it's a car driving around with somebody in the back and nobody in the front. And it was just confirmation that it's here, just plain and simple, that it's here. So
and they're rolling out to more cities this year. And Tesla's going to be doing the same thing. They've got their robotaxi division starting up. I actually know some things about that I'm not supposed to know, and that's going to be coming soon. Yeah, it's definitely coming. And it's funny that you mentioned the bit about the bot serving as sort of a friend. Kind of the big news in the last, I don't know, 30 days or so has been GPT 4.5 came out, and the I'll spare the tech talk, it's too technical, but the punchline is that it didn't really move the needle on any of the benchmarks. Like, basically, whenever a new model comes out, we always like subject it to our core like tests, if you will, to say like, it scored an 87 on this and 92 on this, right? And we do that, and each time a new model comes out, the aim is to hit higher on those thresholds, like higher English proficiency, higher understanding of arithmetic, etc. This new model from GPT or from OpenAI didn't really move the needle on any of those benchmarks, but it is much more geared for empathy and emotional intelligence. And Sam Altman said that it's the first model that you talk to that it feels like you're talking to a human. And shortly after that, within like a couple weeks after that, I started seeing news of like other models coming out geared towards that, or other like new startups that are geared towards emotionally intelligent AI. And that's an interesting thing. It's interesting for a couple reasons. One, it's interesting because something that didn't score higher cognitively felt more human to us, right? That's interesting in and of itself. But two, it's interesting because it means it's like, what does this unlock for creative works? How much it raises the question of, if we accept the premise that this feels more like talking to a human, that this model is more emotionally intelligent, it maybe isn't, the smartest, but it feels more human, it feels more like me and you. If we accept that premise, then how much of that plays a role in creative works, or like what sort of careers or value propositions are directly impacted by that lever? Because that's something that's hard to measure. It's sort of just something that we kind of feel, or just kind of our own experience. Kind of goes back to that gut knowledge that you were talking about. So I'm very interested in that, because I do think that there is a massive opportunity for companion AIs. I did a panel last year with a few members of the Forbes Council, and one of those members runs a customer satisfaction company. They do reviews and they evaluate different companies and make sure and that sort of thing. I believe the company is called Pissed Consumer. Apologies if I butcher that. He and I were kind of butting heads a little bit, because he was saying there's never going to be a world in which like a little old lady wants to be on the phone with a robot instead of a person. And I thought that was interesting, because I was like, I don't know if I accept the premise as to why that is true. Because my experience talking to little old ladies on the phone, which admittedly small sample size, but my experience is that they might sometimes go off on a tangent or start talking about the weather or get off topic about why it is that they called. And a human is going to be like, well, yeah, sorry, ma'am, I don't know about that. I got to get on to the next caller, or, I got to do this or that. Let's stay focused on the objective. But the AI, who's to say that they don't want to talk to someone or something that is willing to go off on that tangent with them, and then kind of meet them where they are and have them be in control of the dialogue. So I think it's very, very exciting.
So you're not painting a negative picture on purpose, but if you were listening to yourself and saying, I don't think it's going to go that fast, where are the holes in your arguments or what you're saying?
Well, the biggest the way to Iron Man the other alternative perspective is that the biggest hole in my worldview is that progression of technology is not going to actually be increasing perfectly exponentially because of the main bottleneck of training data. Because we have pretty much exhausted all the training data that we have for these systems, and these systems are currently largely dependent on the data that goes into it. Kind of mentioned a couple points. And so now companies are diverting to what we're referring to as synthetic data. So it's not real world data, but using the machines to generate synthetic data that can hopefully be used to achieve higher levels of proficiency. So that's the biggest thing, is if you believe that it's going to start slowing down, it's because you don't believe that synthetic data is going to be as useful as real world data, which to that I would say you're probably right. And that you also don't believe that there are going to be any large breakthroughs in terms of the architecture that we are using to construct these systems to begin with, because that architecture, it is the derivative of how productive a machine can be with the data that you give it.
Nevertheless, it still seems like the tech sector is moving forward at, 200 miles an hour on this.
I was going to say, the other thing that if you wanted to lean on the other side would be that it's going to start reaching a point of freaking people out here really quick, and then globally we're going to start seeing a lot of regulations be put on it, and we're going to try to reel it in that way.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Well, what that says to me is that if countries try to do that, then they will just slow down, and other countries will see an opportunity and go a lot faster. Pivoting here, so you're Chief Operating Officer of a company called Doxy, and you're managing partner of another company, Autonomy, and they're obviously related to each other. Talk about what you do for your day job.
Sure. So, yeah, running two companies, Autonomy and Doxy. Autonomy is the parent company of Doxy. It's pretty much the same team members on each company, give or take a couple. But Autonomy is my service-based company, and Doxy is my product-based company. So we started Autonomy with the goal of helping companies that were trying to scale to enterprise level, help them with their monotonous processes. So basically workflow automations, but going in, finding the boring, repetitive stuff that people don't like to do, and building automations to increase their throughput so that they could scale more effectively. Because there's a lot of activities that companies have that don't really move the needle, don't generate any revenue, but still have to be done. Right. Sort of like how you have to brush your teeth in your normal life, but that brushing your teeth and doing your laundry doesn't really move the needle too much on your life, doesn't advance you very much, just kind of maintains. So that was kind of our ethos, was going in and doing the brushing your teeth, doing the laundry type stuff for businesses. And what that led to is one of the value propositions we created was a solution that could automate paperwork. And that caught so much traction that we spun it off into its own subsidiary brand. And that is now Doxy. So the tagline on the website is, it might take a human 5 minutes to read through a corporate document and complete a task, but Doxy can do over 100,000 in that same 5 minutes. So that's kind of what I'm doing for my day job. It's been nice because there are a lot of things that people don't want AI to do, but there's nobody's fighting to do paperwork. Nobody really wants to do paperwork. So people would be like, "Oh, so you're taking people's jobs?" And I'm like, our tech is doing jobs that nobody wants to do.
Yeah, makes sense. That's cool. Good. I'm as you were describing what the companies do, I was thinking, so at my trade association, we have a newsletter, and all we do is we gather news and then we summarize it, and we designed it, put it in a MailChimp document. And it's important because busy CEOs need to see the news of the week and general trends and what their neighbors and what their competitors are doing. And it's just good to bring all that intel together. So we do that. We do have computers that gather the news, but a human goes through and decides what news is going to be included. But nevertheless, I think I can imagine what would you call it? An AI bot that pulls together the vast majority of all pertinent news that we would need to see in a week, and then present it as a finished newsletter, and then maybe a human reviews it to say, yeah, maybe we'll take out 10% of this.
It's funny you say that, because I literally 2 days ago just finished up a proposal for the government of Qatar on that exact use case.
Really? So they're gathering news from around the world? Oh,
for economic analysis. Yeah.
huh. From around the world?
Yeah, our articles and reports.
Okay. Well, and that is the job of about 20% of one person in my organization.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. That's the thing is too is it's there's a lot of fragmentation in the knowledge economy with the type of where it's like you said, that's 20% of someone's day. That's not anybody's full-time job. You don't have 50 people doing that as a full-time job, but you might have 5 people or 10 people that do 10 to 20% of their day with that. And so it's interesting when we look at it where it's like it's not necessarily going to be the case that we are displacing 100% of someone's day or someone's role within an organization. It might just be that 20% that's monotonous that lets them focus on the more impactful 80% that we can't automate yet.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, question about fraud. As humans interact with computers, email, texts, we all get these fake communications that give us links and so on and so forth and want us to pay money. And I'm wondering if that gets even more sophisticated when you're moving to a more robust AI economy.
It does, but so does fraud detection. So that fraud and fraud detection, I think, is a thought experiment that perfectly exemplifies what we're going to see with that is spam filters within email inboxes, where there's the people that are, it's a never-ending war between the digital marketers and the spam filters, right? So the digital marketers are always going to come up with some new creative way to get that offer into your inbox. And then the spam filters are always going to come up with some new creative way to filter that out so that you don't see it. And they've kind of been ping-ponging nonstop for the last, since email came out. So decades now. I don't know if that hits a ceiling and what happens at that ceiling, but for something like that, I would have expected us to have already hit a ceiling by now, personally. Like, I would have expected there to have been a winner determined from that battle. I'm not going to say which side or the other. I would hope the spam filters, but I would have expected to see that, and we haven't. So then when we look at something like fraud, which is like a much broader, that's something where the possibilities, in my mind, are infinite. There's much greater number of possibilities than the first war that I talked about with spam filters. So I don't think that fraud will ever go away. There's always going to be some new sophisticated way of conducting fraud. And then there's always going to be a new sophisticated way of detecting it. As far as being useful to the audience, I would say that you can no longer trust someone's voice from a random phone call, or even really someone's face from like a FaceTime. We are able to synthetically generate pretty much anyone's voice on planet Earth. We are able to synthetically generate moving video image of anyone's face on planet Earth. So we've seen, there have been a lot of stories lately about elderly people getting phone calls from someone pretending to be their grandchildren, asking them to send money. Obviously, you should never do that. If you get a phone call from someone that is asking you to do something like that, to asking you to send them money or do something, unscrupulous or that could potentially be unscrupulous, one, you should always make sure that they're calling you from their phone number. If they have some reason for why they are not calling you from their normal phone number, then you just need to ask them a question that only they would know the answer to first. And currently the fraudsters don't have any way to get around that part yet. So that's still a safe go-to. So, like, what was the name of the lake that we went to so-and-so time or whatever?
We talked about that issue among my family and decided that we would have a family safe word. And it's a word that no one would ever know. And we would just ask, what's the safe word? And even that question that you asked hey, tell me about that vacation that we had when you were 8, and we went to the Northeast. Where was that? And somebody might guess and pinpoint the exact vacation, but it'd be pretty hard.
Yes, safe word's a way easier, more effective way. Safe words.
Well, it anticipates getting through the emotion of a situation, because if somebody's calling asking for money for some reason, and it's you need money for what? Oh, I'm in jail, or I've been kidnapped, whatever it is. There's emotion on the end of the receiver, and no matter what, it's just engaging on that safe word to make sure that you're talking to the right person. And at my office, not a real sophisticated office, but we develop a coding system that changes every day between the CEO and the chief financial officer for paying bills, basically, or mostly paying bills that might come along that we would not have seen before. We have approved vendors, but sometimes there's vendors that come along that, what was this for? And it seems like it's a big number. And if me acting as the CEO knows what that's about, I will make sure that the code is included in my note, and always request a confirmation in a different way that the CFO initiates. The CFO contacts me, calls me. I give you the code. That seems like it's good enough. No, call me, because we don't want to just set $10,000 to just anyone. Yeah. But those things have to be thought about in advance, recognizing that there is fraud. So let's just develop a system that we use. It's like carding everybody at the liquor store, no matter how gray their hair is. And that's a rule. That's the rule we follow. Everybody gets carded, and therefore there's never any question, and it's fair for all. So one last question, which is about cost. I've heard that various chips that NVIDIA has developed, for example, a lot of energy, this is comma or period, there's a lot of energy needed for AI because you need a lot of computers. Those computers have to be cooled, so you need energy to cool those computers, and there's data centers being developed all over the place for that. And then I heard, so this is I'm at the end of the branch of my knowledge here, DeepSeek, Chinese company, came up with a simpler way to develop AI. Simpler, more energy efficient, all that stuff. And so I'm wondering about the evolution of technology in that area as well. So maybe some of those estimates are overstated related to energy and the need for data centers and so on.
Yeah, so there's a couple things to unpack there. First and foremost, let me say that we don't know as much about DeepSeek as we would like to. There's reason to believe that they have been fabricating their numbers in terms of like they've almost certainly fabricated their cost of investment to develop the tech. So that we're pretty confident that they lied about. They put out some numbers the other day showing the margins that they're operating on, and that they are not operating at a loss like the American giants are. These are newer claims that are still being investigated, but I'm guessing this is speculation, but I'm guessing if they lied about how much money they said that it took them to develop the system, that they're probably also lying about how much money they're saying it takes to run the system. So, time will tell on that. It's their bill at the end of the day. So we'll see what happens with that. But so there's that. As far as overestimating is concerned, and like how that's going to change throughout time, and then if that means that the projected needs of these data centers and things like that is overstated, the cost of compute will definitely go down. The first computer was the size of an entire office floor, right? Now you have a supercomputer that fits in your pocket that could do 10 times the work, right? So I believe that the cost of compute will go down. The size that is required will go down for the hardware. There's going to be advancements in hardware. We're already seeing certain things like combining biological human brain cells with silicone, and it sounds otherworldly. Look into it. It's pretty wild, but we're seeing there are new pieces of hardware that are being created that are using 100 times or I don't know the exact metric, but like 100 times or 1,000 times less energy than traditional hardware that has been used for compute. Now it's still in its infancy, but the fact that we're talking about taking an actual human brain cell, putting it in a petri dish, combining it with silicone, and that it's actually transcribing ones and zeros it's insane. It's pretty crazy to think about. But it's like, if we think about, it's also kind of logical when we think about the number of computations that the human brain conducts on a daily basis, and the human brain does not need as much energy as the standard supercomputer. So the logic is sound from my perspective. If they are able to figure that out technically, then that's incredible. There are people that are raising ethical issues about that, about like at what point is a biological hybrid type of entity like alive and things like that. I won't get into all that, but like my point is that there's no shortage of creativity. There's no shortage of great ideas, we'll say, and that people are constantly coming up with ways to drive the cost down. So I think that we're just in the boom right now, and everybody's moving fast and breaking things and being loud, and I think that's okay. And I think that we have more evidence to believe that the cost is going to go down than we have evidence that the cost is going to go up or stay constant. So I'm bullish on that. Also, I would say that I think from a personal standpoint, I think that the solving AI or AGI is going to be one of the most defining moments of the human species. And so I think it's of paramount importance. I think it should supersede any other initiative that one could have for the species at this point in time. And the reason I say that is because it's like, if the climate crisis is too far gone, which I'm not going to say it is or it isn't, if the climate crisis is too far gone, well, currently it's too far gone for humans to solve. And so that means that if we want to solve it, we better hurry up and get this AGI going and hope that it can kind of hit some marks, figure some things out that we haven't been able to figure out. So that's kind of where my personal philosophy is on it, admittedly biased. Now, to kind of tie that in with, are these projected costs out of line or faulty for like these data centers? And like Trump just promised $500 billion. They're partnering with SoftBank and OpenAI to do all these data centers and whatnot. I think that time will tell, but I think that the people that are the most in the know, the people, Sam Altman, Elon Musk, these people that have more access to this information and that are more embedded into this world, they seem to believe that those costs are not, and I trust their judgment over anybody that is not at the tip of the spear, personally. And also, I think that like the data, we don't even know what's going to be necessary from all of the humanoid robots that are about to be pumped out. Because currently we talk about how many ChatGPT users there are and whatnot, but it's like that is a fraction of the computing power that will be required if and when there is a robotic humanoid in every home. That's a totally different thing. That takes a different level of computation and depends on what school of thought, which camp you're in. But Musk believes that there will eventually be more humanoid robots than actual humans on Earth. And so it's like we're talking about very big numbers that are hard to comprehend. And when we think about it like that, I think that $500 billion is right on the money. And if anything, it won't be enough as time goes on, because the story of technology thus far has been a reduction in the cognitive load of a human being, like reducing the amount that you have to think about something or think to achieve an objective. And when we think about it like that, if that's a trend that we want to see continue, we are reaching a point where there's not going to be anything that we can even conceptualize doing that we could not offload to either a software artificial intelligence or a humanoid robot using artificial intelligence.
I was worried that we weren't going to have enough to talk about today. But we could go on and on. So let's pause there. Sure. And then let's come back and talk as technology and society evolves and see what's up in a few months, because I think something will change.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Austin. It's really been a great conversation.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Thanks to Austin Ambrozi for being our guest today. And thank you for listening. If you want to get in touch, or if you have an interesting topic and know someone you think would be a great guest on the show, send me an email at barry@barrymoline.com. And please leave a 5-star review, which helps others find their way to the Great Ideas Podcast.